Hello, good morning to everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar today, and special thanks to those that are attending from a non-European Union time zone. My name is José Emilio Rico, and I'm responsible for the strategy and business development at DEKRA Digital and Product Solutions, and I'm also responsible for the development, operation, maintenance of DEKRA's private schemes, cybersecurity private schemes, and the corresponding conformity assessment bodies. So today we will be talking about implementation, transition, and operation of the new EUCC scheme, and not to spoil it too much on the entering into detail in the agenda points. We will talk about the story for the development of the EUCC and a summary of the essentials of these schemes, and we will focus more on the new actors in the movie, especially on the new obligation of the manufacturers. There are some hot topics that are currently under the table, even though we have the EUCC published as a regulation and enter into force. There are some points that are of concern of different stakeholders and still under discussion. And finally, I want to finish the webinar explaining the usability of the EUCC and using an example, a specific example of the usability of EUCC for the presumption of conformity of the fulfillment of the Cyber Resilient Act essential requirements. I will try to take some questions if the timing allows it, and you can write these questions or have you say in the chat, and I promise to, for those that we don't have time for responding, and I promise if you send them to me by mail, I will answer. So the story can start in the 90s. So the cybersecurity property was fully accepted by the stakeholders in the 90s, by the government, by manufacturers, and other entities. It was fully accepted as a property for products and services, processes, entities, etc., as well as properties, desirable properties, were the performance or the safety. So with this property, the situation was that the government and the national authorities were developing their own standards, cybersecurity standards. And for the sake of the harmonization and mutual recognition, in 1991, in the European Union, it started with the development of the first European Union standard, which was the ITSEC, Information Technology Security Evaluation Criteria. And this was the baseline for forming the Senior Official Group Information Security, the well-known SOGA-YES, that was formed for facilitate the cooperation and mutual recognition on security certification in European Union. And the need for alignment with other countries finally deals with the development of a new standard which were recognized worldwide. And therefore, there are so many countries involved in the European Union, the Netherlands, France, Germany, the UK with the ITSEC, and the US and Canada, for example, the Green Book or the Orange Book, and all of them put together the understanding of the cybersecurity and build a well-known common criteria. This common criteria was the base for an update of the SOGA-YES, which was expanded in the 2000 to include more European countries, and also this MRA of the SOGA-YES to be aligned with global standards and ensuring compatibility with the also well-known CCRA, the Common Criteria Recognition Agreement. And this agreement, the SOGA-YES, was also updated in 2010, for example, to start the development and including technical documents and methodologies for the technical domains in smart cards and similar devices, and those with security boxes. And things started to grow and grow and grow. And all the fields in the cybersecurity have more presence in the reality, starting with the development of regulations. In particular, in the European Union, we are championships of the development of regulation, so to say. And so we have right now many regulations in place, others under development, which finally have a kind of overlapping and been a nightmare for the manufacturers, for them to put the products into the European market. And also, therefore, manufacturers are growing. There are more products with security or security products to be put in the market. And as well, national accreditation bodies with more work, all the entities in charge of the management and the maintenance of the scheme and the execution of certification processes and evaluation, all the business grow very much. So with this situation, then one of the most important developments that was a turning point in the European Union was the development of the European Union Cybersecurity Act, which was adopted in 2019. This CSA mandates the Cybersecurity Agency in Europe, ENISA, to establish a framework for the development of European cybersecurity certification schemes. And this laid the groundwork for the EUCC. So in 2020, ENISA started with the development of the of the scheme, and following the process, the normal process, ENISA builds the ad hoc working groups with members belonging to the government, to the national accreditation bodies, to the manufacturers, and to the conformity assessment bodies, certification bodies, and lab. And all of them worked very hard during 4 years for the development of the scheme, even though the scheme was fully based in the existing SOC-IS practices. So finally, the scheme was published and adopted in February this year, February 2024. So have a look, take in mind the effort needed for the development of the scheme, for the consensus, long time, for 4 years, even though this scheme was fully based in the existing practices on the SOC-IS. So the Implementing Act was published in the official journal on 27 February this year, and this launches a set of transition and preparation periods. The first one is 1 year for the preparation period of all the entities in charge of performing the maintenance of the scheme and the certification activities. So this means conformity assessment bodies, the national cybersecurity certification authorities, etc. Then the reason for that is because we will be able to see the first certificate, EUCC certificate, in 27 February 2025. And then we have a transition period where SOC-IS certificates and EUCC certificates will live together. And this finishes in 27 February 2026. So this means that the certification bodies will accept applications of the older SOC-IS procedure during this year, with the condition that all the certification finishes by February 2026. So even though we have the Implementing Act published and accepted, there are current work items between the ECCG, the European Cybersecurity Certification Group, and ENISA, still working on them. And the first will be documented in the so-called state-of-the-art documents, which are documents that are appended to the Implementing Act, to the regulations, and they are mandatory for all the stakeholders to be met. And a couple of them are on the table right now, which they are the update of the accreditation requirements of the ITSFs, the labs, the Information Technology Security Evaluation Facilities, which are the labs, and the requirements for the accreditation of certification bodies. And there are other documents, other publications that will be included as part of the scheme that will be published as guidance. They are not mandatory. And right now, there are 3 types of documents under development: the authorization of conformity assessment bodies, requirements for the authorization, vulnerability management and disclosure procedures, and how to deal with the cryptography as traversal practices to be applicable for all the schemes. This group is assessing the ECCG, and they are using, again, the documents that were published in the SOBAES. So the EUCC has been published then as having all the scheme elements properly defined. We have all the definition of conformity assessment activities defined. So this means the selection and determination are activities for the labs, planning and the execution of the activities, evaluation activities, and also we have those activities related to the certification process, the review, the certification decision, attestation, and surveillance. All of these activities have been published within the scheme documents, and of course we have subject matter, scopes, and purpose of the scheme. The category of the EUCC for the products to be certified are the ICT products in general, and there are assurance levels allocated to the EUCC. So the CSI published 3 possible assurance levels: substantial, high, substantial, and basic. Basic belongs to the self-assessment for the manufacturers, is not possible in the EUCC. So EUCC only addresses high and substantial, and there's a clear mapping between the older AVA-BAN component in the common criteria to the high assurance and substantial assurance. So the BAN 1 and 2 are associated to the substantial level, and BAN 3 to 5 are associated to the high assurance. The reference, of course, to international standards and the security evaluation criteria are the common criteria, the common evaluation methodology, well known, and as I mentioned, the state-of-the-art documents. New things that are possible are the private certification body that can issue certificates at substantial level, and the whole ecosystem will be required to be accredited. So let's move into the actors of the movie. So there are many actors in the movie. There are some of them that belongs to the European Commission, the member states, and market surveillance authorities. We also have entities that are in charge of the maintenance and the operation of the scheme at a higher level. ENISA, of course, and the ECCG group, with members from the member states and the European Commission and the NCCAs. The NCCAs are the National Cybersecurity Certification Authority. This is a new entity that is appointed by each of the member states and is in charge of everything related to the harmonization, operation of the scheme in each of the member states. And finally, we have those entities that are in charge of performing all the certification processes. We have the older governmental certification bodies and the new private conformity assessment body with private certification bodies, and the labs. All of them to be accredited by the national accreditation bodies, the lab, and the most important actor in the movie, which are the manufacturers, and finally, hopefully, the holders of the EUCC certificates. So let's go deeper into responsibilities or perspective of the different actors, starting from the National Cybersecurity Certification Authority, which shall be appointed for each member state, and of course they have some perspective, some responsibilities at a higher level. General one, the cooperation with other NCCA to handling the complaints, the peer assessment for harmonization among certification bodies and high assurance, the peer reviews among all the NCCAs, and the management of all the information with the necessary security related to the CSA certificates or vulnerability information. The responsibilities can be split in 3 different branches. The first one deals with the authorization and accreditation support for the conformity assessment body. We have also another branch defining responsibilities for the market surveillance and the scheme monitoring, and finally, everything related to the management of the results of the vulnerability handling and the coordination needed for the vulnerability disclosure information. Governmental and public certification or public certification bodies, and the obligation of these certification bodies that are the older one are the same, that they have been carried out during these years in the SOGA yes, like the review of the evaluation results, verification of the ETR, etc. But the issuance, suspension, renewal, and withdrawal of the certificates right now is only for the assurance level height. This is new because the substantial level will be addressed by the private certification bodies. So, of course, there are monitoring activities with the compliance of the holder of the certificates with the new obligation of the EUCC, of course, the compliance of the products, and checking and monitoring the assurance expressed in those protection profiles that have been certified in the EUCC. Of course, the management of the information related to the vulnerability management and disclosure coming from different sources, starting from the manufacturers. And they have to be accredited against 17065, and there's additional requirements coming from the state-of-the-art documents, in particular those related to the competence management system that need to be developed according to the ISO series 19896. The certification bodies, as they are, these governmental ones, as they are for high assurance, need to be authorized by the NCCA according to the requirements defined for this matter, and in order to demonstrate their technical competence. And finally, because they are in high assurance, they have to undergo peer assessments. Talking about commercial caps, all the obligations that they have are the same as the public certification body. And as I mentioned, the issuance of the certificates will be at assurance level substantial. And again, they have to be accredited in the same way than the governmental certification bodies. If we talk about the labs, the ITSF, the obligations for the execution of the evaluation are the same, but there are new obligations that are related to provide support in vulnerability management activities, monitoring, surveillance, what is needed from the certification bodies and the NCCA. They also have to be accredited according to 17025, and again, they have to implement the competence management system as with the other certification bodies. When talking about an ITSF performing high assurance evaluation, they have also to be authorized by the NCCA for the demonstration of the technical competence and undergo the peer assessment. So these are the conformity assessment body ecosystems, which are more or less the same that we have seen in the SOGA-IS practices for many years. But during the development of the scheme, there appears some interpretation. Historically, 17025 or 17065 have some problems with meeting all the requirements in the accreditation, and this has been historically a problem. And thanks to the national accreditation body participating in the other working group, there were some activities that were defined finally not to be as part of ISO 17025. Mainly those activities related to the ALC class, to the assurance life cycle. All this evaluation of this documentation mainly related to the site visit. And these activities were allocated in 17065. And somehow, right now it's accepted that the certification body delegates in the ITSFs these activities. But in principle, we have a period also for moving that of five years. And finally, probably the ITSF will be needed to be accredited in 17065 for addressing these activities. So this is an example of the scope of an accreditation for the certification body as well as for the ITSF. And we have a certification field, which is the ICT cybersecurity evaluation. And the object for the certification are the products, the ICT products, that can be allocated in different equivalent classes. The first two are those belonging to the technical domains, smart cards and similar devices, and hardware device with security boxes. And the other products need to be included, in this last category, generic software and network products, even though maybe they are not network products, but currently this is the name. Another field that need to be appear in the accreditation will be the assurance component on the common criteria. Maybe, for example, year 3, augmented by ALCFR 3, for example, and the reference to the scheme, which is the EUCC. So let's move into the manufacturer's perspective. So what are the things to prepare or consider by the manufacturers for facing the EUCC process? And to summarize whatever is needed, complex things and new things for the manufacturer, we have split all of these activities in 4 blocks. The first one, preparing for the EUCC and running the EUCC, and then what will be happen after receiving the EUCC certificate and how to maintain the certificate and apply the assurance continuity procedures. So, for the manufacturers to be able to start an EUCC certification, the first thing is the content of the security target. The security target is the same that we have in the previously, because we are targeting a common criteria evaluation and certification, and a justification based on the risk analysis for the assurance levels shall be provided to the certification body for the acceptance of the evaluation. At least, and this is something that is different, at least it is required to have one component of AVABAN and one component of AT-IN, so for the functional testing. And together with all the dependencies according to the common criteria rules. And if the category of the product has an applicable state-of-the-art document on a protection profile, certified protection profile, then this will be mandatory to be applicable. So this is the content of the security target, and then the second step is to be aware that all the information necessary for the certification is ready. So of course, first thing is the evaluation evidence, which is fully the same that we have seen previously in the SOC-IS and required by the common criteria. And then the manufacturer shall provide a link to a vendor site. This is because Article 55 of the CSA, including information of the product, the guidance for the security configuration of the product, and maybe some links to repositories of applicable vulnerabilities, etc. And of course, they have, this is also new, ready procedures for the vulnerability maintenance and disclosure. So then the next step will be to sign the commitments with the certification body. Commitments are, of course, to commitment for providing all the required information for the certification, and also to follow the promotion rules of the certificates of the products according to the status of the certificates, as well as, this is optional, if they are using label and marks, there are specific rules for doing that. And finally, the manufacturers are select the conformity assessment body. If they are targeting high assurance, then maybe a governmental certification body. Some NCCAs are accepting commercial certification body for high, if they are authorized, and of course with an authorized lab. And if they are targeting substantial level, they can use the commercial certification body with an accredited ITSF. So running the EUCC has not too many secrets here, so there will be no major differences with respect to the previous SOC-IS practices. We only have to take into account the possibility of having always the ALCFR for evaluation of vulnerability handling procedures, and also the patch management that we will be commented later on in this webinar. So the assurance level covers, as I mentioned, as substantial and high, and based on a risk analysis. And also take into account that when targeting high assurance evaluation at band 4 or band 5, these evaluations are restricted to a few, very few scenarios, mainly those related to the technical domains using the state-of-the-art documents that they are applicable, and so they need to be accepted by the certification body and NCCA. There's a possibility of, if the product does not fall into any of the 2 technical domains that are currently accepted and published, and they are not foreseen to the development of a new technical domain in the future, or they are not protection profile, then the evaluation can be accepted. This shall be approved by the NCCA, and so this is not the standard situation, but can be accepted. And so when a 35 pp exists for the product type, it becomes mandatory. So these are the main rules for running the EUCC. And what will happen after receiving the certificate? So there are new obligations for the manufacturers related to monitoring activities, for remedial actions when non-conformities exist or are detected, and of course the execution of vulnerability management and disclosure procedures. We'll go a little bit deeper into these obligations. So monitoring, of course, there are monitoring of conformity of the products with its security requirements, and this monitoring uses information coming from different sources related to applicable vulnerabilities to the product, and also including all the dependencies, known dependencies that have the product, third-party components that were included in the product. And of course, also the monitoring of the assurance expressed in the certificate. There's another obligation, which is the supporting of remedial non-conformities. If there are non-conformities identified by the certification body, for example, on the toe or related to the holder of the certificate's commitments, then there's a procedure for the certification body, and there are consequences that can lead to the suspension or withdrawal of the certificates if the remedial actions are not taken in less than 30 days. So, related to vulnerability management and disclosure, there are specific articles and chapters explaining the requirements for that. So the holder, as we commented previously, the manufacturer shall establish and maintain vulnerability management procedures, and there are very nice ISO document references in the EUCC, the ISO 3111, which is not mandatory, but is recommended to help manufacturers in the development of these procedures. And these procedures are being informed to the certification body. This also applies to when we have a composition, the holder of the certificate of the composition shall inform the holder of the dependent component certificates. So this process shall be applicable for every received notification of a vulnerability for the different sources. And the manufacturer shall analyze the impact of the vulnerability and develop a report to be sent to the certification body and to the NCCA. And the conclusion of the report can be can address 2 different options. The first one could be that vulnerability is confirmed, but is residual. So this means that it's beyond the ABA-band component that was included in the certificate. And in this case, the certificate is kept alive. But if the vulnerability is applicable and is not residual, then if it cannot be remediated, the certificate will be withdrawn. And if it can be remediated, the solution shall be sent to the certification body for its assessment, and the certification body will review the certificate. If approved, then we will see a new certificate, but if not, if the proposal is not approved, then the withdrawal of the certificate will happen. If we have a withdrawal of a certificate, then vulnerability disclosure responsibilities on the manufacturer are applicable, and the manufacturers are disclosed and register public known and remediated vulnerability in the different repositories that are allowed for that. So we can have the European vulnerability databases or any other repositories as per Article 55 of the Cybersecurity Act. So when it comes to the maintenance of the certificate, we have different possibilities where the manufacturer can request a reassessment of or a review of the certificate. We can address the reassessment. We can think about the changes, the impact on the changes of a certified product. We can have also the application of patch management, and if it's included, the possible changes in the life cycle procedures of the product. So if the manufacturer has an unchanged tow, but there's changes on the operational environment, then the manufacturer can request a reassessment to the certification body. These reassessments shall be performed by the same laboratory that performed the original certification, and an updated ETR shall be sent for review to the certification body. And then, according to the conclusions, the certification body shall report its reassessment to the NCCA and to ENISA and apply the Article 13, which deals with the review of the certificate with 4 different possibilities: to confirm the certificate, to withdraw or suspend the certificate, or to submit or issue a new certificate with a different scope or with the same scope, and in this case, with an extended validity period. If the manufacturer changed the tow, then there's a need for analyzing the impact of the changes in the tow through the impact analysis report. This is quite similar to the assurance continuity procedures that were accepted in the SOC-IS and also in the CCRA, but here minor and major changes are not so detailed as we can find in the assurance continuity procedures. So in any case, the certification body is in charge of making the final decision of whether the changes are considered minor or major. If the changes are major, then a reevaluation will be required by a lab, and we will see a new certification body, a new certificate, and a new certification report, hopefully. If the changes are considered to be minor, then we will see a new certificate, but with a validity not exceed to the original one, and a maintenance report. All of this shall be sent to ENISA by the certification body. And finally, we have the patch management. The patch management thing is a new possibility for the manufacturers to include them and to easy what will be happen with the certification in a set of scenarios where a patch is applied to the product. This has been an historical problem, and then we have a partial resolution of it, providing a procedure for smooth management of the already certified products. So there are 3 scenarios where these procedures can be applicable, and there's also a very nice ISO document referenced in the EUCC, which is the ISO 9569, including an extended components of the ALC class, the ALC PAM, and this will be applicable when the patch functionalities are outside the tow, or when the patch resolves a minor change, or where the patch relates to resolve a vulnerability with critical effects on the security of the products. In other cases, this means with major changes, then applicable to fix a vulnerability with no critical effects, then the patch, this procedure is not applicable, and then we have to go to apply the Article 13 with the review of the certificate, as mentioned previously. And the new patch shall be when something happens related to the scenario, the manufacturer shall deliver the new patch in 5 days. And when the first scenario happens, then affected functionalities outside the toe, then the manufacturer shall report the certification body and issue the patch, and we will see the same certificates. If there's a minor change, then the patch shall be submitted to the lab for review for the procedures, whether the procedures have been applied, and the lab informs the certification body, and we will see a new certificate and a new certification report. If we are in the last scenario, to fix a critical vulnerability, then the laboratory has to reevaluate the patch, but in parallel, the manufacturer can deploy the patch. Again, the certification body will be informed, and hopefully we will see a new certificate and a certification report. So, let's move then into some hot topics that are on the table, and they are of concern of many stakeholders. Here, mostly related to the manufacturers in terms of the protection profiles. What will be happening with the protection profiles? So the process for the protection profiles is not as easy as in the previous scheme and in the CCRA. So the protection profiles will be developed as state-of-the-art documents. They will be mandatory for specific category of the products. And for them to be included in the Implementing Act, in the regulation, that shall be approved by the NCCA and endorsed in the ECCG. And these developments are mainly oriented to help manufacturers in meeting the regulations. So they will be certified for the purpose of the certification of the products falling into the category of the protection profile. This protection profile should be certified only by public bodies, or sometimes a certification body that has received an approval for this specific protection profile. And related to this, the member state for high assurance evaluation, as I mentioned, they prefer to use mainly for the technical domains, execute certification through protection profiles, not accepting standalone security targets for specific products. And one of the important things also that can clarify possibilities are the fact that the EUCC does not recognize those non-EUCC protection profiles. So this means that CCRA certificates, like those coming from the collaborative protection profiles communities, for example, are not recognized. But they can use in the evaluation, so the security target can claim conformance to the CCRA or non-EUCC protection profile, but they have to consider as the content as non-evaluated. In practice, this is not too much. Only the as activity for the evaluation of the security targets shall be executed completely, and as I mentioned, in practice, a couple of days. More things important are what will be happening with existing SOGA-yes certificates when the transition periods ends, and they will have to move into EUCC certificates as a record for the manufacturers. So in this case, these SOGA-yes certificates will be subject for review, case by case, and as long as the manufacturer meets the obligation and the commitments, and probably this would be a very smooth process. If they have also ALC-FLR, or if they wanted to include patch management, of course, then probably we will need to perform some reevaluation activities, but in principle, shouldn't be a complex process. Another very important topic is the mutual recognition between CCRA and EUCC. So the EUCC, there are some articles explaining what would be the recognition of certificates coming from non-European countries. But what will be happening with the recognition of the EUCC certificates in the CCRA? This is another story. This is now under negotiations. These negotiations are between the European Commission and bi or multilateral negotiations with countries. as long as the CCRA is not currently a legal entity that can represent the countries. This negotiation will be between the European Commission and countries. So we don't have too much information right now about this, and hopefully we will see something of this negotiation according to the periods of preparation on transition. Finally, the current national schemes, SOGAE schemes that are covering activities, including the EUCC, will request it to cease to produce these activities when the preparation period finish. So this means in February 2025. This makes sense because they will not be able to accept older application for SOGAEs. So, having reviewed this EUCC scheme and the main topics of the EUCC and the main concerns, let's have a look on the usability of the EUCC. So historically, the common criteria has been demonstrated to be a very good standard for helping the manufacturers in demonstrating the fulfillment of security requirements, including technical specifications. So I'm a fully supporter of common criteria as well as the Atlético de Madrid. So what can I say? A very great achievement using these common criteria, and in particular to meet the requirements of a specific government. For example, in the US, if the manufacturer wants to sell the products in the administration, they are requested to have certification against the NIA protection profiles, common criteria evaluations. And also we have not too much regulations in Europe in this moment, but the industry, for example, recognizes and mandates certification in banking for a point of interactions, or for the security cryptographic devices, the HSMs, or even, for example, in the automotive field, there were regulations asking or requiring the certification of the tachographs in Europe. So there are great achievements, and right now EUCC becomes more important because of the interplay with other regulations in Europe. If you see the slide here, in the left side, we can see those regulations that are in place right now. Some of them entered into force, some of them still ongoing, but soon be published. And these regulations are mandatory for the manufacturers that wanted to put on the market products, processes, services, entities, whatever, because there includes requirements for them. And in the right side, there are also other regulations that need to be considered as tools. They define mandatory conformity assessment procedures and scheme, not mandatory, sorry, voluntary. These voluntary schemes and procedures become mandatory as long as they are requested by the other regulations in the left side of the slide. And examples are the NLF, the New Legislation Framework Decision, defining the Model A, B plus C, and Model H for the full quality system evaluation accepted by the Cyber Resilience Act, and also those schemes developed, well-known, perfectly developed under the Cybersecurity Act regulation. We have only the EUCC, but ongoing EU 5G, EUCS, and in the future, EUDI wallet. So this is a summary of the interplay of EUCC with other regulations, which justified perfectly the usability. So we have, for example, EU 5G, for the certification of the UICC, somehow the eSIM cards, and the usability of the EUCC certification will be a key factor. For ADAS 2.0, we have the required certification, common criteria certification of the remote qualified signature creation devices, for example, or in the UID wallet, the usability or reuse of user certificates. Of course, Cyber Resilience Act, which will be entered a little bit in more detail in the next slides, Artificial Intelligence Act, there was a feasibility study for the reuse of EUCC certificates. NIS2 for entities where Article 23 points directly to the need of having products certified with a CSA scheme, in this case the EUCC. And also we don't have too many regulations related to automotive, but the delegated regulation for the cooperative transport, intelligent transport system mandates the use of EUCC certificates for the CITS station, in particular for the CPOP protocol in charge of managing all the transmission of information related to the certification within the PKI infrastructure. And finally, in Spain, we have the ENS, the National Cybersecurity Scheme, requesting for high assurance products to be certified with common criteria that we expect to see updated very soon with the EUCC. So, very quickly to finish the webinar, I have taken here the example of the usability of the EUCC for the presumption of conformity. It's Article 27 in the CRA, the Cyber Resilience Act. The Cyber Resilience Act it will be applicable. Hopefully, we will see it published and adopted this year, by the end of this year. It was accepted, and the agreement was between the European Parliament and the Council. And also the review by the legal people was performed, and it was pending for the final acceptance of the Council, but because of the European elections, I think that this has been delayed, and we hope to see this mainly in Q4 of this year. I don't know. But when it comes to accepted regulations, this will be applicable for products with digital elements, with some exceptions. And the CRA includes possibilities for the cybersecurity conformity assessment procedures based on the NLF, as I mentioned, but also the presumption of conformity allows the CSA certificate to be used for the manufacturers to demonstrate commitment, compliance with the CRA essential requirements. And there are different possibilities for the implementation of the CRA conformance based on the elements that we have in common criteria. We have Part 2 catalog with the security functional requirements, Part 3 with the security assurance requirements, and the methodology for the definition of extended elements, extended requirements, when the requirements cannot be written in a proper form using the catalogs of the common criteria. For that, one of the options is to develop a standalone security target for each of the product, which seems not to make too much sense. Makes more sense to develop protection profiles for a CRA, for categories, or even more better to use the object of defined for common criteria, which is the PP configuration, including a base PP with the common security requirements, and develop a PP model with extended requirements based on risk analysis. And there are different possibilities here. So I'm talking about the risk analysis, which is a key topic on the CRA and requested for the manufacturers. As the CRA does not mandate any methodology, we can use perfectly the methodology in the common criteria for the development of the security target, which is based on the security problem definition, defining the assets to be protected and the values, the attackers and the threats. And with this information in the security target, we define the security objectives of the TOW and the security objectives of the operational environment to resolve the security problem included previously. And with these security objectives, we can define the security functional requirements and security assurance requirements. So this perfectly fits and meets the requirements for the risk analysis in the CRA. We also have other properties that are required in the different annexes, the properties related to the products, for example, those related to the security by default configuration or security patches or the minimization or data. These requirements can be addressed by the common criteria, but using extended requirements definition. Others, like the protection for data at rest or in transit or for the access control, can be fully addressed using existing SFRs and SARs. The same also occurs with the vulnerability handling, with the ALC FLR and the new ALC PAM, patch management procedures, and also extended requirements for meeting the requirements of the software bill of materials required for the manufacturers to be maintained in order to identify properly and easy the vulnerabilities. Technical documentation and guidances, all the documentation required for the manufacturers, are fully covered by the common criteria, SFRs and SARs, and the methodology for extended components. So the most important thing here when trying to meet the requirements of the CRA through the EUCC is the scope. Historically, one of the most important properties in the common criteria was the flexibility for the definition of the scope of the target of evaluation. This scope can be only related to the security relevant components. So this means that the target of evaluation could be the product, the whole product itself, but also can be a part of the product. This is not acceptable in the CRA because the CRA scope requires the full product together with the remote data processing solution to be in the scope. So for the full presumption of conformity, the scope required in the CRA shall prevail. And if not, then we will address scenarios when having partial presumption of conformity that need to be investigated further using properties of the common criteria like the composition or like the multi-assurance level, or in the worst case, the use of the NLF conformity assessment procedures based on the models to cover the full product. And that's all for the webinar. I will review the chat and happy to take these questions. These are the references that have been used in the preparation of the webinar, and you can find there my details if you wanted to contact me. And let me let me check what. Okay, so we have these questions, which what are the differentiation requirements related to continuous management of patching activities by non-manufacturers when comparing to common criteria? Which channels must manufacturers use to communicate patches effectively and securely? That's a very good question. So the ALC PAM is quite similar to the one that we have seen in the ALC FLR. And this management of the patching activities includes several points to be taken into account in the procedures when developing the procedures requested by the manufacturer. Not only those procedures related to the development, the secure development, but also how these patches shall be deployed, how these patches shall be implemented, and how these patches will be informed as part of the procedures. The information is to be given as part of the procedures to the certification body and, of course, to the IT sets, to the lab for their review and for the possible reevaluation depending on the scenario. One of the things that are not to mix the information of vulnerability with the patches. So patches shall be communicated to the manufacturers according to the procedure similar to the one that we have in FLR. So the procedures of the patch management shall address how these patches will be communicated, deployed to the manufacturers and when, and what will be the impact on the certificate, the status of the certificate according to these patch management procedures. So common criteria currently does not include directly the patch management. As I mentioned, this will be included as an extended component, the ALC PAM, if you are using the ISO document, but this is not mandatory. You can develop your own procedures and explain how you produce the patches, how the patches are communicated, how they are installed, and how is the communication between the manufacturer and the final users. Okay, I have here another question. Is an INSTA-proof protection profile acceptable for the EUCC? I think I have already answered the questions. They are not NIST-approved PPs, but NIAP-approved PPs, or PPs that have been certified and able to have been in the accepted by the CCRA. They are not accepted, or they are not recognized by the EUCC, but they can be used. You can develop a security target claim in conformance to these protection profiles, and the only thing that will be happening is that the assay activity will be fully executed. More questions here. Does the EU cybersecurity certification scheme affects the automotive industry as well? This is a very good question. The approach for the development of schemes, because of the CSA, because of the Cybersecurity Act, the approach for the development is quite weird. And I say that because we have the EUCC already published, and we have running the EU 5G, and we have running the EUCS, and soon we will see probably the UAD wallet or others. The EUCC is a traversal scheme that gives solutions for many verticals, while the 5G is a kind of vertical. So the interplay between EUCC and other regulations to be applicable for different verticals are very clear. So I put an example here for the automotive sector. We don't have too many regulations, as I said. For the automotive, for the CPOC, the EUCC is fully applicable. So the CITS station, whether they are on board on the vehicle or they are roadside units, they're mandatory to be certified using accepted protection profiles that are currently under development. And these protection profiles, finally, because they will be, to meet the regulation, finally will be accepted and endorsed by the ECCG and will be included as state-of-the-art documents in the EUCC. And then, of course, they will be applicable. So as soon as we have regulations that are applied for the automotive industry, they will be applicable. It's not a requirement it's not the case for the CRA, but as soon as we have regulations that affect them, they will be applied if applicable, if we have a kind of interplay. Okay, they have here another question. What happens if a patch updates something outside the scope of the certification while being else also part of the scope? So I don't know if I understand properly this question, but there are three possibilities on the scenario of the patch updates. These scenarios take into account the possibility of the patch functionality relates to parts that are not security relevant. It could be in the scope of the evaluation, but are not security relevant. In this case, there's a minor change, and there's a need of review because they are in the scope of the evaluation, but you can update the product with the patch, and there's a need to perform a review, and probably the certificate will be the same, and there's no need for having a new certificate. Let me check more questions here. Industry. Okay. Okay, there are more questions, for example, related to what will be happen with the, I think I have already answered this, related to the moving the certificates, the certificates to the EUCC. And I have one question here related to the response times to vulnerabilities in the EUCC compared to other regulations. This is a very good question. So in chapters 6, it details the vulnerability and management disclosure processes that shall be implemented by the manufacturer. And the EUCC does not determine strict timelines for these processes, but applies to undue delay principle. Makes sense. For example, in Article 34, vulnerability impact analysis shall be carried out in a time frame appropriate for the exploitability and criticality of the potential vulnerability in the product. In comparison, for example, with the Cyber Resilience Act, there are response times specifically included in the regulation. An early warning of the vulnerability will be happening 24 hours, and more detailed information of the vulnerability, because this early warning only contains a few details. In 72 hours, there will be requested more detail on the vulnerability, and finally, in 14 days after the fix, it is requested a detailed report. So I have a couple of questions. We are running out, but for example, I have a question here on what should be the content of the website of the manufacturers. Okay, so the information requested is to include some guidance and recommendations to help the users with the configuration, the secure configuration, installation, deployment, operation, maintenance of the product. Also, it is required to have information related to the period during which security support is to be offered to the end user, contact information of the manufacturer, or accepted methods, for example, for receiving vulnerability information. As I mentioned previously, for example, a reference to online repository that will list public disclosed vulnerabilities, and the procedures for the vulnerability management and disclosure to allow to later comply with the obligations set by the EUCC. So I see there are more questions here, but I think we are running out, 3 minutes. So I want to thank you very much for attending this webinar. I hope that the content was covering your expectations and useful for you. And of course, anything that you will need, please send me an email or give me a call to using the information you can see in this slide. So thank you very much, and hope to see you soon. Have a nice day. Have a nice holidays for those that you will have. Bye-bye.